Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to yet another installation of our Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break. It is our honor and our pleasure to welcome India Birdsong to today's conversation. Her journey to the Chief Executive Officer position at Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority actually began at a table in her grandmother's basement, where under the watchful eye of her mother and grandmother, she leafed through a book looking at graduate majors following her own commencement from Temple University. There, she identified the program that would clarify her passion and fuel it for years to come about intentional urban planning. She secured her master's degree in her urban planning and policy from the University of Illinois, Chicago, while simultaneously working for the Chicago Transit. Poached away from Chicago, she made her way to Nashville and leadership ranks there, where she worked in the WeGo public transit system before coming north to lend her talents to all of us here in Cleveland. Ms. Birdsong is firmly dedicated to make the RTA mission to provide safe, reliable, clean, and courteous public transportation part of all of our community commitment. RTA is a vital lifeline for Clevelanders with approximately 350 buses serving 59 municipalities, 92 trains, and a workforce of about 2,200 people. Yes, it is greatly diminished from its peak in 1980, but Ms. Birdsong is ready to address that, and growth is on the horizon. If you think she is not an agent of change and someone willing to disrupt her life and those systems around her, you have another thought coming. She moved here after being married for 2 weeks, new marriage, new city, new job, and she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She also, in the course of this past year, facing all the disruptions of the pandemic, gave birth to her first child. Hallmark of her leadership is listening to workers in bus garages and rail yards, riders, potential riders, and the community at large. Our transit has been a subject of great debate, most notably at the mayoral debate last night, and we know that India is going to make positive changes for our community. Barely here for a few months, she was immediately recognized as one of the most interesting people in Cleveland in 2020 and as Crain's Magazine Power 150. At the Leadership Center, we are proud to welcome her to Leadership Cleveland 2022. Ms. Birdsong.
Thank you so much. I'm tired listening to that myself. And I've got 2 pandemic babies. I had my second child earlier this year, so I think I'm finished.
Well, India, we invite you to kind of share your thoughts on the vision of RTA, and then we'll look ahead to the Q&A.
Sure. Well, I'll go ahead and jump in then. First, thank you so much again for just affording me the opportunity to share a little bit about myself and also about RTA, of course. As was so eloquently stated, I have been here for less than 2 years. It'll be 2 years in September, so a little under 24 months. It's been quite a whirlwind, just being able to really understand the dynamics here in Cleveland. I'm not a Clevelander by birth. However, I do have a lot of family in Ohio, so it was a natural sort of progression. Cleveland was not on the radar. However, it was really just a blessing to be able to have it pop up at the time it did. With the pandemic that came, a lot of folks said, hey, sorry about your introduction to Cleveland. The pandemic may not have been the best to be able to have you kind of socialize into the culture of the community. And I said, well, it would have been the same way anywhere in the world. So really, it couldn't have come at a better time. And to be able to really lay the foundation for creating family here in the city and being able to honestly take advantage of the pandemic inadvertently, right, unconsciously, and be able to have 2 kids in the midst of all of this has really been a blessing as well. Over the last 20 months, give or take, I really have been trying to be consciously and intentionally set on culture change here at RTA. And let me explain a little bit of that so that you understand where I'm coming from. As you mentioned, I do have experience in transportation in the larger agencies such as Chicago and the smaller such as Nashville, and then of course some jumps in between. But the roots of my career have really been in community development. I did start out as an editor, English major in college, totally different, never imagined to be in transit. But as I went through the urban planning program a little bit later on, I started to question who makes the changes in our communities, who are making those decisions from a development standpoint and also an accessibility standpoint. And then you can't help but look into equity, especially living in urban areas and taking the public transit system to get around. I like to say I probably had one of the oldest cars for quite a while. I probably only had 2 or 3 cars in my lifetime. And I just hold on to them forever because I do like to take public transit in addition to or in replacement of some of my travels in different areas I've lived in. So Cleveland, it really is a nice setting because the change in culture here starts with being important for transit, right? Transit it means something to the city of Cleveland. We have a lot of investment in the bones of Cleveland infrastructure when it comes to the train, when it comes to the bus system that we have. It's not something new. So in that regard, it was attractive to me because it's a city that understands the necessity of transit, but may not have invested in it over time so that we're at the top of our game currently. So we have a lot of work to do in order to get up to par, in order to get the funding where it needs to be, in order to reinvest in our infrastructure the way that it needs to be, and in order to get our schedules the way that they need to be in order to get people back and forth between work, home, and play. So when you look at systems like Cleveland, we have a transit police force. We have a rail operation already in place with the track work. We have a pretty impressive bus system network that's already operating on natural gas and CNG and not just diesel fuel and looking at electric. We have a lot of the key components that smaller areas may not enjoy. And we have the opportunity to also take it for granted. And that's what I want to make sure we don't do. Understand that we have all of those basic infrastructure systems in place. We're not always taking care of it the way that we need to because the funding may not be there or the interest may not be there if we're talking transparently when it comes to considering public transit and what the future is in Cleveland and also the greater Cleveland region area as well. There's a lot of competitors out there. When you look at ideas of referendum, that's something that came up probably within the first couple hours of me setting foot in Cleveland. What happens with the tax budget? What happens with our ability to compare ourselves and compete with city services like schooling, like fire, like teaching, and education? And my answer to that was in order to be able to even think about being on the docket for a tax referendum, we have to be able to treat ourselves as a private industry, even though we're serving the public. We have to be able to look at the service we have and think and really have a real conversation and say, have we done everything we can do to make the best product and service we have out there incomparable and absolutely needed by the public? If the answer is no, then we're not ready. So that's why we're taking the next few years to really be able to push and pump a lot of the financial conversations out there, to be able to take advantage of a lot of the pandemic funding in the right way, right? Because you can only use that funding for certain items, operational reimbursement and the like. But be able to pay down debt with some of the funding that we have that's applicable. Defeasance is a huge issue that we have actually tackled this year. It's almost essentially unheard of in the industry to be able to pay down bonds and debts 10 and 15 years in the future when you have that capability. To be able to say that we haven't laid off a single soul and have not gone into furloughs through an 18-month or so pandemic is something that we're really proud of. We also have gone into the next generation or next gen service redesign. We completed that in June. That was probably pushed back about 6 months just due to the pandemic and wanting to get out there and get public comment. But we have completed that process, and that's just the first step. That's not the end goal, right? That's just the first layer. Now we're starting to look at our rail replacement. As you may or may not know, we did get a little bit of publicity about the solicitation process and the procurement process for that. We actually are going back out to bid because we want to make sure we get the right product to be able to serve Cleveland accurately. And we're looking at a project that's got a pretty hefty price tag on it. you're talking about $300 million. That's nothing to sneeze at. So when you do that, you want to do it right, and you want to be able to defend the use of public dollars in a way that really substantiates the purchase. So we expect to be able to, if all things go according to plan, be looking at a new rail fleet, replacing the one that we've got within a few years. So that's going to be a huge accomplishment as well. And then looking at legislation to be able to keep funding our service through the state. When we look at the differences between what Cleveland may be able to afford versus a Columbus or Cincinnati or Toledo and the like, we have to understand that we're kind of, we take up the majority of that pie, so to speak, because we have a legacy system and we do have infrastructure that is ending its state of useful life. So we've got to be able to be realistic about how much money is actually needed to be able to keep our infrastructure going in a way, again, going back to the potential referendum, at some point, we want to make sure that we are in a good place to say, we've done everything we needed to do, we're at the top of our game, and we are meeting expectations for our customers. We also have to look at equity. Are we serving the right neighborhoods? Are we serving, and when I say right, I mean the neighborhoods that need us the most, and also the ones that have the higher ridership, and also the ones that have lower ridership that may not know that our services are available. You've got a lot of people that are moving around the city in different ways due to the pandemic, where they may not be coming into downtown anymore physically, but they may be here to live and going other places. So there's a lot of different kind of tugging that's going on with the scheduling to be able to make sure that we have the buses and the train operating as they should to be able to meet the demand for folks that are either moving into downtown to live or either coming out of downtown to work. So we're actually looking at partnerships as well when it's applicable. I did, if it's okay, want to touch on our mission statement for a moment, if that works. Okay, I'm seeing the nod. The benefits of WebEx and Zoom and everything. We wanted to take a look at what our stance is for coming to work every day. And when I say that, as you mentioned, we've got over 2,200 employees, and that's a lot of bodies and minds in order to get on one accord. We had been under the same leadership for upwards of 20 years. It was a great leadership administration, did great things. However, there is a different way of moving toward the community impact that we wanted to be able to get away from the technical sort of image that we may have had in the community. We do great things, we're great operationally, but we want to make sure that we are doing the things that the community needs. We don't want to make the decisions in a silo. And to that end, we had a mission statement that was very technical. We want to be safe, we want to be on time, we want to be reliable and friendly, but those are the tenets of a basic service that's meeting the basic need of the community. We will continue to do that, but we had conversations about why we're here. What's the reason you come to work every day? And usually it's not the technical, that's kind of how you do things. What we found out is we want to be a community partner. We want to have a seat at the table before things are developed so that we can actually operate effectively and sustainably as well. So we actually, made it really simple, connecting the community. That is our new tagline. That is our new mission statement. And as far as looking at what that means, we have to be able to be actionable when we talk about the partnerships. Getting an award is fantastic. Sitting in a lunch is fantastic. Sitting in a meeting is great for networking purposes. However, we want to be able to look at what was the impact we had on Cleveland and the greater Cleveland area, and were we able to connect people to social services? Were we able to connect businesses and workers and special events? And were we able to help bring the economy back into a state of good repair for the city? So those are the kind of things we want to be at the table for. And then also innovation. We want to be able to be part of that conversation so that we really can serve as a connector and not just a bus and rail company that pushes the vehicle down the street.
India, thank you so much for sharing what's to come and some of the steps you're taking. We have had some questions come in.
Sure.
So let's start with, as you are seeking public comment and hearing from the residents, what are some of the themes that you're hearing through those sessions about what they look for in our public transit?
As far as what our customers are looking for? Is that the question? Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely. I can talk about this all day too. So I saw the chat starting to fill up. So I thought I'd stop and answer some questions. As far as what people are looking for, they're looking for reliability. They are looking for services that connect them to the right places. I think that we have to make sure that we're revamping and tweaking our schedules and our system as the neighborhood changes. So I've heard a lot of people asking about connectors. I've heard a lot of people asking about streamlining services. You know, maybe there's a redundancy where there's 2 or 3 lines that operate down the same corridor, and you may see reduced ridership because of that. And that's really what we are trying to address in the next gen. And again, that is the first iterative phase. We can continue to tweak our services. People are also asking for clean vehicles. They're asking for services that they feel comfortable on. Safety is a big issue. Again, I mentioned in the beginning that we have a transit police group here, and we have that task force. We actually have just hired in our newest chief of transit police, Chief Jones, and she comes to us from the city. That relationship is really important to make sure that we are effective and we're friendly in the way that we operate with our customers. Diversity is a huge component of the chief's kind of initiative to be able to get out into the community, making sure that we reflect the community we serve. So I know that we're going to be working with our marketing department and also our HR department to make sure we can start to recruit in some officers. We have a lot of vacancies that are available for that sort of infill, and we'll be taking a very inclusive approach to that sort of filling of those positions and in those community outreach programs. We also are looking at talks about ambassadors. That's been a question. So people have been asking about the safety, as I mentioned before, easier fare payment options. That's definitely something that we hear, and it's a cry for assistance, right? So we have to be able to meet that need. We have to make things easier for people to take. Regionalism is something that we have to get to as a state. That's something that, of course, requires a lot more coordination and conversation. But I think the technology and our ability to be more ahead of the game when it comes to fare collection options, when it comes to how much we're charging as far as not the actual amount per ticket, but the bundling option or fare capping option, being able to make your trip easier when it comes to bundling how many transfers you may have, right? That again was the beginning process of the next gen, to be able to streamline so you don't have to have so many transfers on your trip. But my question would be, what happens with the first mile, last mile? That's something also that came up in feedback. What happens if we take you 80% of the way and you got to walk the rest of it? How do we actually partner with those other mobility options, whether it's a scooter or a taxi or a bike, an e-bike or what have you, to be able to get to your end destination? So we're looking at different options for piloting programs. We actually are looking at a micro mobility pilot that we should be able to have out on the street here pretty soon, within the next, I'd say 45 days or so, that gives neighborhood employers an opportunity to pilot some sort of shuttle service that we would assist with the marketing and scheduling of, and perhaps adopt it into our actual service model upon successful completion. So those are different options that we have, and we want to be able to kind of push the box and not just say no, right? We've got to figure out what the solution is. So the answer might be not right now, however, in X amount of time, we'll get it done. So being deadline oriented and deadline driven is the way to go.
We've had a few questions come in around the rail system, and more specifically around the stations and the neighborhoods for the stops. And how might RTA be looking at potentially taking a more active role in developing the neighborhoods and the areas around our rail stations?
So that's a really good question. I am, as you mentioned, I'm a planner by trade. And so I get excited about these kind of questions. It's always to either the chagrin or the excitement of the staff that we got. So what comes to mind immediately is 79th Street corridor, right? So you're talking about an area that might have been looked at as community blight because of disinvestment and just over time not being kept up the way that we would expect. We have put in thousands of dollars, if not millions, into that particular area to be able to get that rail station back up and really on par with some of our best. There is an amazing amount of opportunity with partnership, whether it's through the planning department at the city, whether it's through some of the local developers, to be able to make transit-oriented development a real priority for RTA. And really, it should be something that's a priority for Cleveland as well, I believe. So we've got a lot of real estate in our coffers that we utilize for connectivity purposes. However, I think we've got to be able to look at multi-use areas, be able to think about what happens to that parking lot that may not be full now. Could that turn into a space of transit-oriented development where there might be a mixed-use housing component? There might be a transit, bus stop. There might be a Dunkin' Donuts, for example, to be able to get coffee in the morning on your way into work. Those are the areas in the communities that we have to create this safe place, this nexus for community engagement and accessibility, where we can actually take advantage of being a player in the development of the city. So like I mentioned, Opportunity Corridor is a really good example of something to that caliber. And then also be able to think about how do we start to plan for better investment when it comes to bus and rail kind of infrastructure in the city. I do think that we have a lot of opportunity. Even how we connect to Tower City is something to think about as well. I know there's been a lot of conversations about kind of the next step in the future of that area. How we connect to Midtown, how we connect to all of these sort of kind of innovation hubs. And then also, how do we connect to the outer ring suburbs where folks may actually be going to work? So we're starting to really kind of think outside the box and thinking more of a community as a community player. There might also be, tourism and, visitation sort of areas where we can assist with making that experience better and brighter when you take our system. So there's a lot of opportunities. We have worked with, I'm trying to think of the most recent sort of partnerships. Graffiti Heart comes to mind, if you're familiar with that kind of artist collaborative when it comes to multimedia and art sort of installations. We have worked with them. We've worked with a couple other kind of artist collaboratives to be able to pick different stations and kind of walls, kind of like the one behind me, to be able to use as an expression of DEI, diversity and inclusion, statements and slogans, and also just cultural change, to be able to say, hey, we're here, we embrace the community that we serve, and we need to be able to kind of emote that positivity. So those kind of collaborations are absolutely important. We also are doing a lot of work with DCA to be able to, and DCIC, I know there's a lot of kind of letters there, but the Destination Cleveland and that group, and being able to think about what are ways that we can take advantage of changing the face of downtown and also out in the communities to be able to embrace what RTA means and really have more of a direct community impact.
So as we are embarking on the beginning of the school year, there are a few questions that come in about how does RTA work to ensure safety and access for the students who are having to utilize RTA daily to get to their school?
So this has been something that's starting to come up, especially with a lot of the kids that are going back into the schools physically because of the break, if you want to call it that, from the physical distancing through the pandemic. We do provide a lot of service to school children. One thing that we have found, which is really disheartening, is the digital divide in Cleveland. And I know this is not a new topic. This is something that probably a lot of folks, even on the call, have been talking about in their own circles. The question is, how can RTA sort of help to bridge that gap? We actually have a homework hotspot program that we launched earlier in the year and even in the fall of last year to be able to push Wi-Fi accessibility on all of our vehicles and also the majority of our stations, so that when we do have school-age children and really anyone who is at those stations and on those buses and on those trains, that they can have the opportunity to utilize our Wi-Fi free. So we have successfully completed that campaign. And we have pushed that to make sure that folks know that RTA is also a safe place to be able to be connected, even if you don't have that connectivity in your own home. We also do a lot of work through our district council, and that's more in the districts, the garages that we have, to be able to have back to school programs, whether it's a backpack, filling it with pencils and pens and notebooks and all that kind of thing, or coat drive, and that we do a lot of those kind of charitable giving throughout the year, especially around the holidays. But we're taking a look at how to partner with, whether it's CMHA for housing or CMSD for education, taking a look at how do we partner with programming so that students feel safe, so that students feel okay with taking public transit. They're not worried about if they can get home in the evening. As I mentioned, we talked about looking at an ambassador program. Our chief of police is looking at that and thinking about ways that we can actually impact those community members. And we talked about that. How do kids get back and forth in their school? I've had conversations with the head of CMHA and looking at some of the redevelopment projects that they have going on that really impact school-age children, and how are we looking at our bus shelters to make them more amenable, to make them safer? Are we looking at route timings to make sure that they are meeting up with school bell time? So we're doing a lot of things on that end, but there's always a lot of work to do, and we still got a long way to go.
So we are coming up on a mayoral election, and many of the candidates have great aspirations for the transit system, yet we know that you face significant budgetary constraints to realize those aspirations. How are you looking ahead to being able to work with a new mayor coming into Cleveland to try to realize some of those goals?
So primarily, I'd say I work with anybody who's in the seat. We definitely had and of course, that's the politically astute answer, right? You got to be able to do that. But I think that, it's real in that there's an equity that goes into it. We have a lot of candidates that are out there. From what I understand, we haven't had a new mayor in Cleveland in over 16 years. So there's a really big opportunity for change. There's a really good opportunity for new ideas. I think that the current mayor and Mayor Jackson has done a phenomenal job when it comes to the stability of the city. You have certain institutionalized agencies that do what they do very well. I do think I am embracing this opportunity to piggyback and launch pad off of the things that Mayor Jackson's administration has already put in place and take it to the next level. What are the ways that we can work even more closely, right? It gets back to the community conversation I had before. Is RTA, selfishly picked up in conversations about development? Or are we called at the end when it's time to overlay a bus route on a development that's already been pre-planned, right? We might not even be able to get the vehicle down the street because it's too large. That's an example of previous projects that I've been on in other cities. How do we talk about issues like workforce development? Are we in those conversations? We have an amazing amount of opportunity at RTA that goes just beyond, driving the vehicle or cleaning the vehicle or even managing the garage. I mean, we have ideas and we have departments that people don't even think about when it comes to transportation. And this is industry-wide, it's just not Cleveland. We've got an entire legal department. We've got an entire engineering department. We've got HR professionals. We've got government officials. I mean, there's a lot of different opportunities here to really be able to invest in your future. And I think we've got to be able to work with the administration, whoever it is, in City Hall to be able to make that apparent. I do think we've got a diverse candidate slate. Everyone is different. However, I do think sustainability and transportation have to be at the top of mind for the ideal candidate, because it's something that will propel us into the next generation of people who want to stay in Cleveland and people who are attracted to come here. As we mentioned, I'm not a native of Cleveland, and to be very honest with you, some of the conversation is, why Cleveland? Why would you go there? And the answer is, it's a great city that you would not recognize until you've been here. So how do we bring people in and how do we retain it? I have a vested interest like anyone else. I want to see the community be bolstered. I live here in Greater Cleveland. So being able to contribute to that, I think, is absolutely important. I want to see it thrive. As a Midwesterner, I think that's important. Sometimes we're kind of skipped over when you look at the coasts And we've got to be able to, you know, toot our own horn a little bit louder than I think we've done in the past.
Well, India, we have come up very quickly on our time today. We have had a few questions that are asking specifically around plans for specific lines or planned access, such as like the health line or access to healthcare institutions. Where can someone go to learn updates on what plans may be in works?
Sure. So if you want to go on our website, our RTA website, Ride RTA, I think that that's given a pretty good example of the projects that we have coming up. We actually are in the middle. Was in a meeting yesterday about revamping some of the landing pages that we've got. We will be providing linkages to a lot of that. We actually are working on a holiday launch, marketing wise, to be able to kind of give people links to things that we're working on as well. So I would say stay tuned, go on our website, feel free to give us a call in our customer care service center as well. But we will be working on a marketing campaigns to be able to kind of push that out. In the meantime, I would say stick with us. We are definitely changing internally and externally. And if there is a project that you would like us to partner on or either consider, I'm looking at the chat and I see a couple of folks that, you know, say RTA might be a perfect fit for different things. Definitely reach out to us. Our external affairs department is operated by Ms. Natoya Walker Minor. We have a plethora of individuals. Steve Bitto is over our marketing department. We have a bunch of individuals that can help with that. We also have HR and training, but definitely look us up, let us know, and we will take a look at how to be able to be good community partners.
Thanks so much, Ms. Birdsong. We look forward to working with you and watching your vision unfold in the years ahead. The first female leader at RTA, the first leader of color at RTA, and the first millennial leader at RTA. You are making waves, and we are thrilled to be a part of it.